You're watching Let the Quran Speak. Now we answer questions we've received from you, our viewers. And if you have a question yourself, you can visit our website, www.quranspeaks.com. Okay, Brother Shabir, the first question is an interesting one. The question is debated by other scholars as well. And the question is, if God is almighty, can he create a stone that's so heavy that he cannot elevate it? I'm sure you've heard this question before.
Yeah, I mean, there are different ways of approaching this question. One is to show that the question itself is not real, even though it has the form of a question in terms of English grammar.
Do you mean it's illogical?
Yes, it involves a kind of recalling on itself. It's really asking, in effect, is God so powerful that he can be powerless? That's one way of approaching it. The other way is to think about what really we mean by God, because the question seems to start with the assumption like God is like one of us, and there is something to do, and can we do that thing? But the concept of God is not this, really. The concept of God philosophically is that God is he is the source of everything that exists. And everything that exists now and that we observe, including rocks, actually owe their existence to the mind of God. First of all, as we think about a watch, for example, first of all, the watch exists in the mind of the designer. Then it is put on paper, a prototype is drawn up, and then the watch is manufactured. So that manufactured watch really owes its existence to that idea in the mind of the designer. And now, if we think of rocks owe their existence to the mind of the designer. So when God decides to create a rock, like he decides the specific dimensions of that rock and the specific position where that rock will be. So there's no lifting after this. Can God lift the rock? God decides where he wants it, how he wants it, when he wants it, and what shape and size and mass it will have. So the question itself really doesn't take into consideration what we mean by God. And when we take into consideration what we mean by God, we realize that he's all-powerful, he can do whatever he wants, and yes, he can create a rock that is big, and he can shift it wherever he wants, and nothing exhausts his power.
But the latter part of the question, where God creates a rock that's so big that it could crush God, that doesn't make sense to you then?
No, it doesn't make sense, because the idea of a rock coming from God's mind will be commensurate with and coincidental to the power and the creative mind of God.
Okay, all right, we'll leave it at that. Okay, this is another difficult question, and this is about an individual who is a Muslim but concerned about his non-Muslim friends and where they will end up. Will they end up in hell, even if perhaps they were not born in a religious family and therefore didn't have an equal opportunity to be a Muslim as he did?
Well, we shouldn't think of people automatically going to hell just because they are not Muslims. The Quran actually gives us a wider view of things in this regard. The Quran speaks about responsibility. So a message is delivered to you, and then you have a responsibility based on this knowledge. God will try you on the Day of Judgment because he gave you this knowledge, and then you didn't act according to the knowledge. So then the question arises, what about a person who didn't get this knowledge? So we should think more broadly and realize that everybody has a sort of range of possibilities open to him or her. We often think of physical possibilities. So it's within the physical realm that I can go here or I can go here or anywhere in between. But I can't go outside of that physical constraint. But there's also a mental constraint. What people can think is also constrained. There is the thought that has been thought. There is the thought that hasn't been thought but could have been thought. And then there is the thought that just couldn't even have been thought. So what about that? Now, for some persons growing up in an Islamic environment and so on, there are certain thoughts which are natural and which will occur almost without fail. And some other people growing up in some other parts of the world exposed to a very different social context will be exposed to a range of thinking. And for such persons, perhaps it doesn't occur that, maybe I ought to be a Muslim. and no, I don't want to be. So the question I ought to, no, I don't want to be, which is the rejection part, may not actually occur to a person. We don't know. This is left to God, and it's for Him to judge and say, okay, well, you knew the right thing, why didn't you do it? So it's not for us to judge. And as far as we can see, to many persons, the message of Islam has not been delivered to that extent with the degree of persuasiveness and clarity that would make us feel that this person is responsible and he's just turning away from God for no good reason. Mm-hmm. So in that case, we should say that it must be within the possibilities of God's mercy that He will welcome people into that mercy in ways that we don't quite understand. And we can explore our tradition, and we do actually see that there are ways. God forgives often without just looking for a small excuse for forgiving people and welcoming them into His grace.
All right, we've run out of time. I know you could talk much more on that, but thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
And we'd like to hear from you. Please visit our website, www.quranspeaks.com. Send us your comments, your suggestions, and of course, your donations. I'm Safiya Ali. For all of us here at Let the Quran Speak, thank you for watching. I'll see you next week.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.